Welcome to today's aftermarket trade recap. Quickly, I will go over the AM session as well as the start of the PM session, and then I will go over the trade and why I took the trade that I did today in the PM session. And towards the end of the video, I will go over a little bit of a channel update, but not too much just because of the fact that I plan on making a separate video anyways that will go more into that. But just jumping right into the aftermarket trade recap itself, in today's AM session, it wasn't really a good AM session whatsoever. We did have some pretty decent targets, going short or long. So it was kind of just to see what would be respected confluences wise and what wouldn't be to plan whether to go short or long. Obviously, I never am going off predictions. I'm just going off what the market is telling me to react off of. So that was that. I once I had seen Asian highs swept, that's obviously where once we couldn't get a closure above, that I was looking more towards targeting London and Asia lows. But just off the sweep alone, I couldn't really validate taking anything just because there was nothing else that was giving me confluences to go short. So that's why I didn't, as well as it obviously wouldn't have worked out. Now I have been trailing to significant points, kind of based off dollar values, but also technicals as well. So if I were to have taken this, maybe I would have got stopped out in profit. But again, all we had was the inversion and the sweep, but like nothing else. Maybe there's an SMT here. Let's see. No, there's not. So it's just there wasn't anything to take. And again, price action wasn't validating anything to take. So that's why I didn't go short. I know that some people did trade the M today, and throughout the community, a lot of people, from what I had seen, it was a losing day because again, people did see good targets in the day. It's just price action wasn't really presenting that. So to me, not saying I'm standing out from the crowd, but I just didn't see anything like I've already mentioned worth taking. So that's why I didn't. And around the 10:25, 10:30 mark is when I realized, okay, the AM session's pretty much done. There's nothing that's really going to happen in AM. So all I can really hope for is towards the PM that volatility starts picking up and things actually start presenting themselves. So that's what I had waited for. Once I had got back home after lunch session, that is when I had started to notice, okay, we're starting to get the move down here. Volatility starting to pick up pretty decent. And then, right, I got home around this time, around the 150 mark, 145. And I was busy doing some things as well and somewhat distracted too. So, again, that is on my end. But looking back on it, I did realize that there was a possibility for me to go long here on the 3 minute. Yeah, the 3 minute, or technically even the 2 minute, because this is a trading leg. We have the high, the low, and then I could have just taken the inversion here. That would have been the best setup that I could have taken today. That's the only really I'd say like B plus setup that I could have taken, and that would have netted around like 55 points. And I just didn't see at that time that not only were we having like a V-shaped recovery, but again, it's like at the time I'm not going to notice that, but what I should have noticed is that one, we had an SMT here, as well as the fact that we swept this 15-minute low, and that could have started to justify it, as well as I think we tapped into, yeah, we tapped into this 1 hour and held it. So this would have been like a B plus setup for me. So definitely something I should have taken, but again, at the time, I didn't see that. Once we got a closure above this high, that's when I was starting to see, obviously, like a break of structure and more validation that we would continue higher. And that's when I had set the lunch high as the draw for the PM session. And at that point, once I'd realized, okay, I've already missed this, now I just have to wait for an entry to present itself within this leg somewhere. So that's obviously what I was hoping for. And that's basically essentially what I got. But as you can see, we started to come up. I'm starting to mark out things here because around this point, especially, is when I noticed, okay, we're kind of hovering around and starting to accumulate more around lunch high. So once we started to put in this LRL, this is when I wanted to see it just get ran through, tap into, I believe this is a 5 minute order block, maybe a 3 minute. Yeah, I think it's a 3 minute. Yep. 3 minute order block, as well as a 5 minute unfilled for value gap. And at that point, that would be getting into the A range setup where we really sweep low resistance, obviously hold these levels, and then I have an inverse to go higher because again, the draw is still this high as I already had mentioned. So that's what I was wanting to see. We weren't getting that. Once we got to about here, obviously this is where I was hoping we would see that, but that's not the case. So then we came up, and then again, generated some more LRL, and that's also when I was hoping mainly to see both of them. But at this point, I figure we probably weren't going to get that move. So really, what I'd want to just see is at least this LRL get traded down through, and then tap into this 15 minute. And now, just because of how price was and a few more things, like it was a little emotional today in the setup, even though it was very quick, but there was just so much going through my thought process. But again, I still had said if I see we run through the LRL, tap into this 15 minute and go higher, then I'm taking the setup. It obviously, if an inverse fair value gap presents itself, which it did on the 3 minute. So that's exactly what I did. Is I took the entry once we got the 3 minute here, even though it's over here, but that's on this candle is where I had entered. And it's kind of like when I had entered that I I don't know, there was no really need to get emotional, but it like again, nothing when I get emotional now, there's nothing to make me do stupid things like break my rules or over risk heavy, like nothing like that. It's just still like the emotional of like, was this a good entry? And it's also because as you can see here, like I have an SMT and I have an order block. These are things I didn't see at the time. Again, it was just mainly just trying to keep it as simple as possible. As I've said, we run down, tap it in the 15 minute. That's good enough for me. So this still is following my rules, following my setup. It's just more so the fact like that I got filled here because originally, obviously, I'm always trying to get filled as close to the inverse as possible. And if that would have been the case, that would have been a 1 to 2 with very minimal risk. And that would have been better if you can see there. That technically is where the target was originally. But I couldn't now justify having the target there because that would be less than a 1 to 1. Obviously, I can't do that. So that's kind of what I mean where I got emotional in the sense of like trying to capture more. So I was trying to validate reasons to like see where I could set a take profit higher. Now, we did have previous day high still up above, and that is something that I knew in the beginning of the day, but I wasn't solely focused on at that time. Okay, I got lost there for a sec. So, yeah, that wasn't something I was super focused on at the time. It was just mainly the lunch high. That was my draw. If we did go to previous day high, which we did, that's great. But as long as I can capture 1 to 2, I'm fine with that. But yeah, so I try to look for like a 15 minute, which of course it did get ran through. It was over here, this 15 minute high. But I was like, okay, this is kind of being setting emotional TPs, I guess you could say. So I just, I mean, my stop, I think it was a little more up here, but I just adjusted it lower and then as well as adjusted my take profit. But as again, for the stop loss, that's technically where my stop loss should be, anyways, because if we look at the 3 minute, I'm not going to put it down at the wick just because again for TP reasons, stuff like that. So the next valid spot would be to be at the body of the candles for me. Again, that's part of my rules, everything like that. But like I said, the biggest thing was just getting emotional, as in setting the take profit a little higher, and as well as the fact that it's just again, that's something I'll get more into the end of the video, but as of recently, just some missed entries. So where I don't take it when we get the close because I want to wait for the retrace. Like, I can't remember if this. Okay, this was Friday. So, like, last Friday, I had a setup where I was out of the house and I could have taken the entry off the close. It wouldn't have been exactly a 1 to 2. I think it would have been like a 1.6. I don't remember exactly, but I was waiting for the retrace. I was also on my phone trying to get into the trade, and it didn't retrace far enough to get my limit order filled, and it would have been a pretty good setup that would have ended up playing out. So that's why I said, like, if I saw all these things happen that I've mentioned, that I'm going to enter just off the close alone. But now looking back at it, now that I have the more information, everything like that, like it really was a decent trade to take. It's just more of the sense that I want to try to look for those 1 to 2s. But this is something that I needed to take. Like I mentally needed to take a 1 to 1 or just something that could be a valid win. And again, even though I said my original draw was the high, it's just obviously this isn't, necessarily not possible just taking the high and not getting a few more ticks past the high. But I also was, like I said, I was very confident the high was this, or the draw was this high, as well as the fact that with how much we accumulated, once we pushed through, I figured it still would be a bigger move, and that's exactly what happened. Once we finally started getting that distribution, as you can see, these candles are pretty large compared to what we have back here, and we pushed through, tapped, kind of like a break and retest if you trade that way. And then we went higher before coming back down. Now, I also could have taken a mech setup here where it just takes out the high and then I target. But the thing is I probably wouldn't have taken that because the 15-minute was already tapped into as part of my entry. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I can't really ask for more on a day like this. It was also, like I said too, with the price action just being so weird today, that was kind of having me a little like, oh, like, maybe I might get stopped out and then it runs a high, but you can't rely off things like that. I just know basically that my model is presenting itself and this is something I have to take and I just have to adjust to the risk. That was more really the biggest part, is just having to adjust to the risk and not getting the exact entry that I wanted. But yeah, like I said, once I realized all these other things too, this really justifies taking the setup. And if it was a loss, I put in my journal that, at the time maybe I would have been emotional, like, oh, this wasn't actually really a good trade, but it was. And if it was a loss, once I realized the SMT and the order block, I would have been like, okay, this was a good trade. But that's that. Probably a little confusing because I kind of kept going over a few things, but I'm really trying to just get all the process and what I was thinking of in the moment, just because it was just a weird day. It was an odd day. Let's just put it that way. But kind of like what I was talking about mentally wise is just the fact that, again, just a quick update is like I'm still on the Express accounts that I have, the one through Top Step, the one through Apex, and I'm just basically, not changing anything. I'm following my rules, I'm sticking to my risk, and just trying to get out a drawdown. And the biggest factor of that is the fact that I have not been consistent trading over the summer. So when I do place a trade and it's a loss, it's like I won't basically win or lose till like a long time because I just wasn't trading on a consistent basis. And now I'm getting back into it. I'm really, you know, every step that I take a little break away, I'm always trying to then come back into it with a more improved mindset and more of like, what could I do that's not excessive? So like I was supposed to backtest a lot over the summer, at least, like a week a day, and that's something I wasn't doing. Now I'm starting to do that on a more pretty consistent basis, and that's obviously just helping me refine things as well as figure out, things like my RR and win rate and stuff like that. So that's going pretty good. And that's why I mentioned like I've been trailing now. Obviously something like this I couldn't. And I also forgot to mention like my break even point was this buy side level. So even if we took the buy side level and didn't get those few extra ticks, worst thing come to worst would have been a break even trade. But that's basically that. Like I said, I will make a more in detail video of kind of just how I got in that phase of not being consistent and maybe a few more other things. I don't know. This video is already getting too long. But anyways, that's a little bit of that as well as the setup that I had taken today. So yeah, as for these specific videos, again, they were made to more so help me. And it's like now I mean, I've had it for a while, just TradeZella, and that definitely helps me a lot more because I can actually see statistics and things compared to just watching back these playthrough videos. So at this point, it's more so just like content wise, but I still will say I'll probably make a few of these, but in the future, going further down the line, I kind of do just want to make probably more informational videos and things that are more useful to others watching them, as well as just videos that I kind of like think are better to post than just these trade recaps, just because yeah, there's obviously based on my audience, there's not really a huge point of these besides for me. So that is that. Like I said, hopefully I will try to get the more sit down and talk video out. And because again, I feel like that might actually be able to provide some use to people as well. But that is it for today. And yeah, just kind of expect that video next. Peace out.